The smell of caramelized sugar and diesel fumes filled the night air as the Moonlight Carnival prepared for another evening of chaos. Neon lights flickered against the darkening sky, casting rainbow shadows across the dusty fairgrounds. Children's laughter mixed with the mechanical groans of aging rides, creating a symphony that Marcus Wellington had never heard before. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. At 7 years old, Marcus stood frozen beside his father's polished black sedan, staring wide-eyed at the spinning Ferris wheel that towered above everything else. His small hand gripped a $20 bill so tightly that Benjamin Franklin's face had begun to wrinkle. "Stay close to Jenkins," commanded his father, Richard Wellington, without looking up from his phone. The billionaire CEO's voice carried the same cold authority he used in boardrooms. "And don't touch anything dirty." Jenkins, the family's longtime bodyguard, adjusted his suit jacket and nodded curtly. His weathered face showed no emotion as he surveyed the crowd of families streaming through the carnival entrance. To him, this place represented nothing but potential threats and security nightmares. But Marcus wasn't listening to either of them. His attention had been captured by something magical happening near the entrance. A girl about his age was spinning sugar into fluffy pink clouds, her hands moving with practiced grace around a large metal bowl. She wore a faded yellow t-shirt that had seen too many wash cycles, and her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. When she smiled at the customers, her whole face lit up. "Daddy, look at that," Marcus whispered, tugging on his father's expensive suit jacket. Richard glanced up briefly from his phone call about quarterly projections. "What is it now, Marcus?" "The girl making the cotton candy. Can we get some?" "Jenkins will handle it," Richard replied dismissively, already returning to his conversation about merger acquisitions. "Make it quick. We have the charity board meeting at 8. As they approached the cotton candy stand, Marcus noticed things his father couldn't see from his world of leather seats and private jets. The girl's shoes had holes in them, carefully covered with silver duct tape that caught the carnival lights. Her hands were small but confident, twirling wooden sticks through the spinning sugar with an expertise that spoke of countless hours of practice. "Welcome to Emma's Cotton Candy Castle," she announced cheerfully, though Marcus could see tiredness around her eyes that seemed too old for her young face. "What color would you like today?" Emma Rodriguez had been working the carnival circuit with her grandmother since she could barely reach the counter. At 8 years old, she knew how to make change faster than most adults, how to spot troublemakers from 50 feet away, and how to keep smiling even when her feet ached for 12 hours straight. "Pink, please," Marcus said quietly, still clutching his $20 bill. Emma's eyes widened slightly at the crisp new money. Most of her customers paid in crumpled ones and loose change counted out from jean pockets. But she simply smiled and began her magic, watching the sugar transform into gossamer threads. "You ever been to a carnival before?" she asked, making conversation as the cotton candy grew into a perfect pink cloud. Marcus shook his head. "My dad says they're not safe, but I wanted to see one." "Not safe," Emma laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Carnivals are the safest places in the world. Everyone looks out for everyone else here. We're like one big family." Jenkins stood nearby, checking his watch and scanning the crowd with professional paranoia. He'd worked for the Wellington family for 8 years, and this carnival assignment felt like babysitting duty, something beneath his skills as a former Special Forces operative. "That'll be $3, Emma said, handing Marcus the cotton candy with a flourish. Marcus looked at his $20 bill, then at Emma's patched clothes and worn shoes. Something his nanny had taught him about kindness echoed in his mind. "Keep the change," he said, pressing the bill into her small hand. Emma stared at the money in shock. $17 was more than she usually made in an entire evening. I can't take this much. It's too much." "My dad has lots of money," Marcus said simply, "but you made something beautiful. That's worth more than money." For a moment, Emma forgot about the noise and chaos around them.
This strange boy in expensive clothes with sad eyes had just said something that her grandmother would call wisdom beyond his years. "Emma, mija, we need more sugar from the truck," called a weathered voice from behind the stand. Grandmother Rosa Rodriguez emerged from the shadows, her silver hair braided down her back and her hands dusted with powdered sugar. She'd been working carnivals for 40 years, ever since she was Emma's age. "Abuela, this is Marcus," Emma said, gesturing to the boy who was carefully pulling apart his cotton candy. "He just gave me $20 for a $3 cotton candy." Rosa studied Marcus with the sharp eyes of someone who had seen every type of person the world had to offer. She noticed the quality of his clothes, the softness of his hands that had never known work, the way his bodyguards stood at attention nearby. But she also saw something else, a loneliness that expensive toys couldn't fill. "That's a very generous young man," Rosa said gently. "Your parents raised you well." Marcus looked toward his father, who was still on his phone, gesturing animated about stock options and market volatility. "My dad," he paused, the words catching in his throat. My mom died when I was 5." Emma's heart squeezed. She knew what it felt like to miss a parent. Her own father had left when she was 3, unable to handle the constant travel and financial uncertainty of carnival life. But at least she had her grandmother, who loved her fiercely and taught her everything from making cotton candy to reading the stars. "I'm sorry," Emma said simply, because sometimes simple words carry the most weight. "It's okay," Marcus replied, though his voice suggested it wasn't really okay at all. "Dad says I need to be strong like him. Wellington men don't cry." Rosa's expression softened even further. She'd met many wealthy families during her decades of carnival work, and she'd noticed that money often came with its own kind of poverty, the poverty of human connection. "Strength comes in many forms, mijo," she told Marcus. "Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let yourself feel." Meanwhile, Richard Wellington finished his call and looked around with growing impatience. The charity event was important for the company's public image, and being late would reflect poorly on the Wellington name. He was a man who controlled billion-dollar corporations, commanded respect in boardrooms across the country, and had built an empire through sheer determination and ruthless business acumen. But standing in this carnival, surrounded by flashing lights and carnival music, he felt oddly out of place. "Jenkins, we need to go," Richard called out, already walking toward the car. "Yes, sir," Jenkins replied, stepping closer to Marcus. "Time to leave, son."
But Marcus was experiencing something he'd never felt before, genuine connection with people who weren't paid to be nice to him. Emma was showing him how the cotton candy machine worked, her small hands guiding his as they spun another batch of sugar into edible art. Her grandmother was telling him stories about the different places the carnival traveled, painting pictures of small towns and big cities, of people who came to the carnival seeking a moment of magic in their ordinary lives. "Can I come back tomorrow?" Marcus asked hopefully. "The carnival's here for 3 more days," Emma said, wiping sugar dust from her hands on a well-worn towel. "We'll be here every night until closing." "Marcus!" Richard's voice carried an edge of authority that made several nearby families turn to look. "Now!" Reluctantly, Marcus began walking toward the car, but he kept looking back at Emma and her grandmother. The carnival suddenly seemed like the most wonderful place on earth, a place where a girl his age could run a business, where grandmothers told stories instead of hiring nannies to do it, where $20 could make someone smile like they'd won the lottery. "Thank you for the cotton candy," he called out as Jenkins ushered him toward the sedan. "Thank you for being kind," Emma called back, waving with sugar-sticky fingers. As the Wellington family car pulled away from the carnival, Marcus pressed his face to the window, watching the lights grow smaller in the distance. In the front seat, Richard was already making calls about tomorrow's meetings, his mind shifting back to the familiar world of profit margins and corporate strategy. But in the back seat, Marcus was thinking about Emma's smile, about the way her grandmother's eyes crinkled when she laughed, about the feeling of creating something beautiful with his own hands. For the first time in his young life, he'd experienced a world where people's worth wasn't measured by their bank accounts or business achievements. The next morning brought a different kind of chaos to the Wellington household. Marcus woke up in his vast bedroom, larger than most people's entire apartments, and immediately began planning his return to the carnival. His nanny, Mrs. Patterson, had prepared his usual breakfast of steel-cut oats and fresh berries, but Marcus could barely eat. "You seem distracted today, dear," Mrs. Patterson observed. She'd been caring for Marcus since his mother's death, and she'd grown genuinely fond of the lonely little boy who asked too many questions and read books meant for children twice his age. "I met a girl yesterday," Marcus said, pushing his oats around the bowl. "She makes cotton candy at the carnival. Her name is Emma." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose slightly. Richard Wellington rarely allowed Marcus to interact with other children, especially those outside their social circle. Playdates were carefully orchestrated affairs with the children of other wealthy families, supervised by teams of nannies and held in private homes or exclusive clubs. "That sounds lovely," Mrs. Patterson said carefully. "What was she like?" "She was—" Marcus paused, searching for the right words. "She was real, not like the kids at Dad's parties who only talk about their ponies and vacation houses. Emma knows how to make things, beautiful things, and she's not afraid of anything." Meanwhile, across town at the carnival, Emma was helping her grandmother prepare for another day of sugar spinning and customer service. The morning routine never varied. Clean the machines, check the sugar supplies, arrange the display of flavors and colors that would catch children's eyes throughout the day. "You were quiet last night after we closed," Rosa observed, measuring sugar into the large metal bowl. "That boy made quite an impression on you." Emma nodded slowly. She'd been thinking about Marcus since he left, not because of the money he'd given her, but because of the sadness she'd seen in his eyes. Despite all his expensive clothes and obvious privilege, he'd seemed like the loneliest person she'd ever met. "He doesn't have a mom," Emma said softly, "and his dad doesn't really talk to him, just tells him what to do." Rosa stopped her preparations and looked at her granddaughter with pride. At 8 years old, Emma already possessed the kind of emotional intelligence that many adults never developed. Growing up in the carnival had taught her to read people quickly and accurately. It was a survival skill in their world. "Not all wealth is measured in dollars, Mija," Rosa said gently. "That boy has many things, but he's missing some of the most important ones." "Like what?" "Like love that doesn't come with conditions. Like family that chooses to be together, not because they have to be. Like the kind of happiness that comes from simple things, making something with your hands, helping someone else, watching the sunset from the top of a Ferris wheel." Emma smiled at that last one. She and her grandmother made it a tradition to ride the Ferris wheel together at the end of each carnival day, watching the lights of whatever town they were visiting twinkle below them like earthbound stars. As the day progressed, both children found themselves distracted by thoughts of their brief encounter. Marcus attended his tutoring sessions and violin lessons with half his attention, while Emma served customer after customer with her usual cheerful efficiency, but her eyes kept drifting toward the carnival entrance, hoping to see a familiar figure in expensive clothes. Richard Wellington, meanwhile, was dealing with a crisis that would soon change everything. In his downtown office that occupied the top 3 floors of the Wellington Tower, he received a call that made his blood run cold. "Sir, we have a situation," said Detective Maria Santos of the Denver Police Department. "We've received some credible threats against your family. Given your recent testimony in the corporate fraud case, we believe someone may be planning to target you or your son." Richard felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Building an empire meant making enemies, and his recent decision to cooperate with federal investigators in a major corruption case had put him squarely in the crosshairs of some very dangerous people. "What kind of protection are you recommending?" Richard asked, his mind already calculating the impact on his business schedule. "We'd like to assign additional security to your home and office, and we strongly recommend avoiding public events for the next few weeks."
Richard thought about Marcus's request to return to the carnival. In light of this new threat, such an outing would be impossible. But how could he explain to his 7-year-old son that the price of their wealth and privilege was a constant undercurrent of danger? That evening, as the Moonlight Carnival came alive with its usual neon magic, Emma found herself watching the entrance more intently than usual. She'd prepared an extra special batch of cotton candy, blue and silver swirled together to create what looked like edible clouds, hoping Marcus would return to try it. "He might not come back, you know," Rosa said gently, noticing her diverted attention. "People like that, they live in a different world. Sometimes they visit ours, but they don't usually stay." Emma nodded, but continued to hope. There had been something in Marcus's eyes, a hunger that had nothing to do with cotton candy and everything to do with connection. She'd seen the same look in her own mirror after her father left, before her grandmother had taught her that family was something you could choose, as well as something you were born into. As closing time approached and Marcus still hadn't appeared, Emma felt a disappointment that surprised her with its intensity. She'd only met the boy for a few minutes, but something about their interaction had felt important, like the beginning of something that could matter. She was cleaning the cotton candy machine when she heard a commotion near the carnival entrance. Raised voices, the sound of running feet, and then the unmistakable wail of sirens in the distance. "Abuela," Emma called out, worry creeping into her voice. "Something's happening." Rosa emerged from the storage area where she'd been counting the day's earnings. Her experienced ears had caught the same sounds, and her expression was grave. In 40 years of carnival life, she'd learned to distinguish between normal carnival chaos and the kind of trouble that brings police cars. "Pack up quickly, mija," Rosa instructed. "We may need to leave tonight instead of waiting until morning." But as they began their rapid cleanup, neither Emma nor her grandmother could have imagined that the commotion at the carnival entrance would soon bring Marcus Wellington back into their lives in a way that would change all of their destinies forever. The sound of sirens grew louder, and Emma found herself scanning the crowd one more time, hoping against hope that somewhere in the chaos, a lonely boy in expensive clothes was looking for cotton candy and finding something much more valuable. The chaos at the carnival entrance erupted when 3 black SUVs screeched to a halt in the parking lot. Men in dark suits poured out, their movements coordinated and urgent. Jenkins spoke rapidly into his earpiece while scanning the crowd with trained eyes. Code red," his voice crackled through the security network. "The package is mobile and unaccounted for." 20 minutes earlier, Marcus Wellington had done something he'd never done in his 7 years of life. He'd escaped. While Mrs. Patterson was distracted by a phone call about his father's delayed return from Chicago, Marcus had slipped out through the kitchen door, grabbed his bicycle from the garage, and pedaled furiously toward the carnival lights he could see glowing in the distance. His heart pounded with excitement and terror as he navigated the evening traffic on his small bike. He'd memorized the route from the car window the night before, counting street signs and landmarks. The $20 he'd taken from his piggy bank crinkled in his pocket with each pedal stroke. All he could think about was Emma's smile and the way her grandmother had looked at him like he mattered, for who he was, not what his last name represented.
At the carnival, Emma was finishing her evening cleanup when she spotted a familiar figure stumbling through the entrance gate. Marcus looked different somehow. His perfectly combed hair was messy from the wind, his designer clothes were rumpled, and there was a wild excitement in his eyes that hadn't been there the day before. "Marcus!" Emma called out, abandoning her cleaning supplies and running toward him. "You came back!" "I had to," Marcus panted, still catching his breath from his frantic bicycle ride. "I couldn't stop thinking about yesterday, about the cotton candy and your stories, and—" He trailed off, suddenly aware that he'd just revealed more emotion than his father would have approved of. Wellington men were supposed to be controlled, calculated, never driven by impulse or sentiment. But Emma wasn't judging him. Instead, she was grinning widely, her whole face lighting up like the carnival lights around them.
"I saved some special cotton candy for you," she said, grabbing his hand and pulling him toward her stand. "Blue and silver. It looks like clouds." Rosa emerged from behind the counter, taking in Marcus's disheveled appearance with shrewd eyes. Something was different about this visit. The boy's expensive clothes were the same, but his demeanor had changed completely. Yesterday, he'd been carefully supervised, moving through their world like a visitor in a museum. Tonight, he moved like someone who belonged. "Young man," Rosa said gently, "does your family know where you are?" Marcus's expression faltered slightly. In his excitement to return to the carnival, he hadn't fully considered the consequences of his escape. But looking around at the warm lights and friendly faces, feeling Emma's small hand still holding his, he couldn't bring himself to regret his decision. "They'll figure it out," he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "I left them a note." The note, hastily scrawled on expensive stationery and left on his pillow, had been discovered by Mrs. Patterson 30 minutes after Marcus disappeared. Her screams had brought the entire household staff running, and within minutes, Richard Wellington was on a private jet from Chicago, his face pale with panic and fury. "Make me the cloud cotton candy," Marcus said to Emma, eager to change the subject. "I want to learn how to do it myself." Emma's eyes sparkled with delight. Most customers were content to watch her work, but Marcus wanted to participate. She positioned him behind the counter, showing him how to hold the wooden stick and move it through the spinning sugar. "The trick is to follow the sugar, not fight it," Emma explained, her hands guiding him in small circles. "Let it tell you where it wants to go." As Marcus watched the blue and silver sugar transform into something magical under his inexperienced hands, he felt a sense of accomplishment he'd never experienced before. His tutors could teach him advanced mathematics and classical literature, but none of them had ever shown him how to create something beautiful from nothing but raw materials and patience. "This is amazing," Marcus breathed, holding up his lopsided but recognizable cotton candy cloud. "You're a natural," Rosa said warmly, and Marcus beamed at the praise. In his world, compliments were rare and usually conditional on performance or achievement. But Rosa's approval felt different. It felt real. The peaceful moment was shattered by the sound of approaching sirens and the harsh glare of searchlights cutting through the carnival atmosphere. Emma instinctively moved closer to Marcus, while Rosa stepped protectively in front of both children. "Young man," a voice boomed through a megaphone, "this is the Denver Police Department. We're conducting a search operation." Jenkins appeared first, his professional composure cracking slightly when he spotted Marcus behind the cotton candy counter. Relief and anger warred across his weathered features as he spoke into his radio. "Package located. Repeat, the package is secure." "Package?" Emma whispered, confused by the terminology. But Marcus understood. In his father's world, he wasn't a little boy who wanted to make cotton candy and have friends. He was an asset to be protected, a liability to be managed, a target for anyone who wanted to hurt the Wellington Empire. Richard Wellington emerged from the lead SUV like a force of nature, his expensive suit somehow still immaculate despite his frantic journey from Chicago. His face was a mask of controlled fury as he strode through the carnival, oblivious to the families who scattered out of his way. "Marcus Wellington." Richard's voice carried across the carnival with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Step away from those people immediately." The warmth drained from the evening air as Richard approached the cotton candy stand. His cold eyes took in Emma's patched clothes and Rosa's weathered hands, cataloging them as threats to be eliminated rather than people to be acknowledged. "Sir," Jenkins reported, "the boy appears unharmed, no signs of coercion or abduction." "Of course there's no abduction," Marcus said, stepping forward with more courage than he felt. "I came here because I wanted to. Emma and her grandmother are my friends." "Friends?" Richard's voice dripped with disdain. "Marcus, you don't make friends with carnival people. You certainly don't run away from home to play in the dirt with them." Emma flinched as if she'd been slapped, and Rosa's expression hardened. In 40 years of Carnival life, she'd encountered every type of prejudice and snobbery, but it never stopped hurting when it was directed at her granddaughter. "With respect, Mr. Wellington," Rosa said, her voice steady despite the intimidating presence of armed security personnel, "your son is a wonderful boy. He's welcome here any time." "My son," replied icily, "will not be returning here ever." He turned to Marcus with the same expression he used when firing incompetent executives. "Get in the car, now. We'll discuss your punishment when we get home." But Marcus surprised everyone, including himself, by shaking his head. "No." The single word fell into the tense silence like a stone into still water. Richard Wellington stared at his 7-year-old son in shock. In the boy's short life, he had never once directly defied his father's authority. "Excuse me?" Richard's voice was dangerously quiet. "I said no," Marcus repeated, his voice gaining strength. "I like it here. These people are nice to me. They don't treat me like I'm made of glass or like I'm just your son instead of my own person." Emma watched in amazement as this small boy faced down his powerful father. She'd seen Marcus's timidity the day before, the way he deferred to authority and followed orders without question. But something had changed. Something had awakened in him during their brief friendship. "Marcus," Richard said, his patience clearly exhausted, "you're making a scene. Think about what this looks like." "I don't care what it looks like," Marcus shot back, and Emma could hear tears threatening in his voice. "I care about what it feels like, and being here feels like the first time I've ever been happy." The words hit Richard like a physical blow. For a moment, his corporate mask slipped, and Emma caught a glimpse of something that might have been pain in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by steely determination.
"Jenkins," Richard commanded, "escort my son to the car." As the bodyguard moved toward Marcus, Rosa stepped between them. Despite being dwarfed by Jenkins's imposing frame, she held her ground with quiet dignity. "Mr. Wellington," she said calmly, "perhaps we could discuss this like civilized people. Your son has done nothing wrong except try to make friends." "My son," Richard replied, "is the heir to a billion-dollar empire. He doesn't need friends from," he gestured dismissively at the carnival around them, "this world." Emma had heard enough. Despite her young age and humble circumstances, she possessed a fierce sense of justice that couldn't tolerate seeing Marcus dragged away against his will. "He's just a kid," she said, stepping forward to stand beside Rosa. "He wants to be a kid, not some robot in fancy clothes." Richard's attention focused on Emma for the first time, and she felt the full weight of his corporate intimidation tactics. But she didn't back down. She'd faced worse things than rich bullies, poverty, uncertainty, and the constant challenge of survival in a world that often looked down on carnival families. "Little girl," Richard said with patronizing coldness, "you don't understand the complexities of my son's situation. There are people who would hurt him to get to me. This carnival, these people, they're all potential security risks." "The only person hurting Marcus right now is you," Emma replied with startling directness. The observation hung in the air between them, simple and devastating in its truth. Even Jenkins looked uncomfortable as he waited for orders that seemed to have been forgotten in the wake of an 8-year-old girl's moral clarity. Richard stared at Emma for a long moment, his mind clearly racing through calculations and strategies. But before he could respond, the situation took an unexpected turn that would change everything. A carnival worker came running toward them, his face pale with panic. "Rosa, Emma, we've got big trouble. Someone just tried to break into the office trailer. When Jimmy scared them off, they threatened the whole carnival, said they were looking for some rich kid and they'd burn us down if we didn't hand him over." The blood drained from Richard's face as the implications hit him. The threats Detective Santos had warned him about weren't just corporate intimidation. They were real, immediate, and now they were endangering innocent people who had simply shown kindness to his son. In that moment, Richard Wellington realized that his attempt to protect Marcus by controlling every aspect of his life
had instead led his son directly into the path of the very danger he'd been trying to avoid. And for the first time since his wife's death, Richard Wellington wasn't sure he knew how to protect the thing that mattered most to him in the world. 6 months later, the autumn air carried the familiar scent of caramelized sugar and anticipation as the Moonlight Carnival set up in Riverside Park. But this time, everything was different. Marcus Wellington stepped out of the new, smaller car, a practical sedan instead of the intimidating black SUV, and immediately ran toward the cotton candy stand where Emma was already spinning her magic for the evening's first customers. "Emma, Rosa," he called out, his face glowing with genuine happiness that had become his permanent expression since that life-changing night at the carnival. "Emma!" Emma abandoned her customers temporarily, something she never would have done before, but business had been different lately. Better, much better. The reunion that followed that terrifying evening transformed all their lives in ways none of them could have predicted. When the police caught the men threatening the carnival, corporate enemies seeking revenge against Richard Wellington, it had forced a reckoning that changed everything. Richard had been faced with an impossible choice: continue isolating his son in a gilded cage, or find a way to give Marcus the normal childhood he desperately needed while still keeping him safe. The solution had come from an unexpected source. "Mr. Wellington," Rosa had suggested during their tense negotiations with police protection surrounding them, "what if, instead of keeping Marcus away from the world, you brought a piece of the world to him?" That conversation had led to the most unconventional business partnership in Wellington Industries' corporate history. Richard had purchased the entire Moonlight Carnival, not to shut it down, but to transform it into something unprecedented. A traveling community that could provide Marcus with friends, experiences, and the kind of education no exclusive private school could offer. Rosa now served as the carnival's general manager, her decades of experience finally receiving the recognition and compensation it deserved. Emma had become Marcus's closest friend and informal business partner, teaching him the intricacies of carnival life while he helped modernize their operations with technology and resources they'd never dreamed of having. "Look what we accomplished this week," Emma said excitedly, pulling Marcus toward a new addition to their setup. Where once there had been a single cotton candy stand, now there was an entire confectionery pavilion. Emma's cotton candy castle had become a small empire of sweet creations. Marcus beamed with pride as he surveyed their joint venture. Learning to work alongside Emma had taught him more about business, leadership, and human nature than any corporate internship ever could. "The lavender honey batch sold out again," Marcus reported, checking their shared notebook where they tracked inventory and customer preferences. "And Mrs. Chen from the farmer's market wants to place another wholesale order." Emma grinned. Their partnership had evolved far beyond the simple cotton candy stand. They now supplied local businesses, catered special events, and had even been featured in a food magazine about innovative young entrepreneurs. Richard Wellington approached their stand, but his demeanor was completely different. Gone was the cold authority and dismissible arrogance. In its place was something that looked suspiciously like parental pride mixed with genuine affection for the extended family his son had chosen. "Good evening, Rosa," Richard said warmly, accepting the customary hug that had become part of their routine. "Emma, how are the numbers looking for this week?" "Better than projected," Emma replied confidently, handing him their sales report. "We exceeded last week's revenue by 15%, and our customer satisfaction surveys are showing consistent 5-star ratings." Richard reviewed the numbers with the same attention he'd once given to quarterly reports from his corporate divisions. But now his focus came from personal investment rather than professional obligation. Watching his son thrive in this environment had taught him lessons about success that decades in boardrooms never could. "Outstanding work, both of you," Richard said, and Marcus practically glowed at his father's genuine praise. Their relationship had transformed as dramatically as everything else. Richard had learned to see his son as a person rather than an heir, while Marcus had discovered that his father's love had always been there. It had just been buried under layers of fear and misguided protection. "Dad, can you work the booth tonight?" Marcus asked eagerly. "Emma's teaching me how to run the Ferris wheel, and I want to learn all the mechanical systems." Richard Wellington, billionaire CEO and corporate titan, nodded seriously. "I'd be honored to serve cotton candy to our customers." 6 months ago, such a request would have been unthinkable. Now, Richard found genuine satisfaction in the simple interaction with families, the straightforward exchange of quality products for fair payment, and the immediate feedback of satisfied customers. It had rekindled something in him that years of high-stakes corporate maneuvering had almost extinguished. As the evening progressed, the carnival filled with its usual magic, but the atmosphere was richer now. The addition of Wellington resources had allowed them to upgrade equipment, improve safety standards, and expand their offerings without losing the intimate, family-friendly character that made the carnival special. Marcus climbed up to the Ferris wheel operator's booth with Emma, both of them wearing matching safety harnesses and radios to stay in communication with ground control. The mechanical systems fascinated Marcus, not because they were complex, but because they were designed to bring joy to people. Every gear, every safety mechanism, every carefully calculated rotation was part of creating moments of happiness for families. "See how the motor adjusts for weight distribution?" Emma explained, pointing to the control panel. "We have to make sure every car is balanced so everyone gets the same smooth ride." Marcus nodded seriously, making notes in his ever-present notebook. He discovered that learning was much more engaging when it had real-world applications and when it involved helping people he cared about. From their elevated position, they could see the entire carnival spread out below them like a miniature city of lights and laughter. Richard was behind the cotton candy counter, his expensive suit protected by one of Rosa's colorful aprons, spinning sugar with surprising competence while chatting with customers. Rosa was coordinating the evening's activities with the calm efficiency of someone born to leadership. "You know what I love most about this?" Marcus said, watching a young family board their Ferris wheel car with excited anticipation. "What's that?" Emma asked, making final adjustments to the controls. "Everyone here gets to be exactly who they are," Marcus replied thoughtfully. "No one has to pretend to be someone else or hide parts of themselves. The carnival accepts everyone." Emma smiled at her friend's wisdom. In 6 months, Marcus had grown from a lonely, isolated boy into a confident young person who understood the value of authentic relationships and meaningful work. But more importantly, he'd learned that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in the richness of human connections. The Ferris wheel began its gentle rotation, carrying families up into the starlit sky where they could see the world spread out below them, full of infinite possibilities. Each passenger experienced that magical moment of perspective that comes from seeing familiar things from a new height. As Marcus and Emma worked together to create these moments of joy for others, they represented something powerful: the possibility that people from different worlds could not only coexist, but could thrive together, each bringing their unique strengths to create something more beautiful than either could achieve alone. Richard Wellington had learned that protecting his son didn't mean isolating him from the world. It meant giving him the tools, relationships, and experiences he needed to navigate that world with confidence and compassion. Emma Rodriguez had discovered that dreams could grow beyond anything she dared to imagine when they were nurtured by genuine partnership and unlimited resources channeled through wisdom and hard work. And Rosa Martinez had seen her decades of knowledge and experience finally valued and compensated fairly, while watching her granddaughter blossom into a young entrepreneur with unlimited potential. The carnival continued its rotation through the night, just as it would continue its journey through countless towns and cities, spreading joy and creating connections wherever it traveled. But now it carries with it a living example of what was possible when prejudice gave way to understanding, when fear was replaced by trust, and when the artificial barriers between different worlds were dissolved by the simple recognition of shared humanity. Under the stars, with the sounds of laughter and carnival music filling the air, Marcus and Emma worked side by side. Two children from vastly different backgrounds who had found in each other not just friendship, but a glimpse of the kind of world they wanted to help create.
A world where every person's worth was recognized, where opportunities were shared rather than hoarded, and where the magic of human connection could transform even the most unlikely circumstances into something extraordinary. The cotton candy they created together was sweet, but the life they were building was sweeter still. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.